My name is Roland Langley. I'm 52 years old and I live in Annapolis, Maryland. For most of my life, I've believed in order, in plans, in control. But that night at the conservation gala, something slipped. The dinner was held at the Harborview Botanical Institute, glass ceilings, servers in forest green uniforms, and the smell of wine and orchids mingling in the air. I didn't want to be there. Cassandra had warned me. Seriously, Roland, she said that morning, adjusting her earring in the mirror, these committee people are sharks. You hate this stuff. I'm coming, I said. I already RSVP'd. You're presenting an award, right? I'll clap when I'm told. She gave a tight smile but didn't argue. That should have been my first clue. By the time we arrived, the place was buzzing with people I mostly funded but rarely respected, academic types who spoke in code, always smiling but never quite friendly. Cassandra blended in effortlessly. She wore a deep green gown that made her look like part of the exhibit, refined, untouchable. I was half listening to some donor prattle about genetic seed banks when he suddenly broke eye contact and said, "Well, speak of the devil." I turned and there he was. Dr. Simon Vale. He strolled toward us with that slick, easy confidence I immediately distrusted. Probably early 40s, sharp jaw, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Cass," he said warmly, leaning in like they were old friends, more than friends. "You look incredible." Cassandra stiffened just slightly, just enough for me to notice. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Simon," she said, brushing a hand along her clutch. "Didn't think you'd make it?" He chuckled. "Wouldn't miss it. Besides, I hear the financier of the decade's in attendance." He looked straight at me when he said that. Held it just a second too long. Then that smirk, like he knew something I didn't. I extended my hand. "Roland Langley." He took it like he was humoring me. "Dr. Simon Vale. We haven't met directly, but I've certainly enjoyed the fruits of your generosity." I didn't like the way he said it. Cassandra stepped in quickly. "Simon's been doing incredible work in adaptive genome design. Got that new field grant last quarter. Is that right?" I asked, still watching him. He sipped his wine and said, with the help of some very persuasive internal advocates. Cassandra laughed a little too loudly. "He means I nagged half the board to death." And there it was again, her eyes darting past me, avoiding contact. Later, while she was giving her acceptance speech for some environmental outreach award, I stayed at the table. 2 seats over, a pair of researchers were whispering. "Can you believe Vale's budget this year?" Came out of nowhere. "Cassandra's department, right?" "Yeah, but he leapfrogged like 6 projects." My stomach turned. I looked back toward the podium. Cassandra was smiling, speaking passionately about invasive species, her voice calm and steady. But all I could see was Simon, leaning against a column, arms crossed, watching her like he already owned the place. When she stepped down and our eyes met, she looked right through me. That's when I knew. Something was off. Very off. Back at home, Cassandra kicked off her heels and headed straight for the kitchen like nothing happened. "I'm making tea," she called out. "Want anything?" "No," I said from the living room, still in my jacket. "I want to talk." She didn't answer right away. I heard the kettle click on. I stood at the edge of the doorway watching her open a tin of chamomile like it was a normal night. "That guy. Vale," I said. "How do you know him?" She didn't flinch. "Simon? I already told you, he's just one of the newer darlings. Committee loves him." "That's so." She set the tea bag in her mug and leaned against the counter. "Roland, come on. He's harmless. Just a loudmouth with flashy ideas. You avoided eye contact with him all night." She rolled her eyes. "Jesus. Are we doing this?" "I'm just asking." "No, you're not. You're accusing. Which, by the way, is getting really old." She grabbed her mug and brushed past me. "This paranoia thing? It's not attractive." I didn't respond. Just watched her disappear down the hall, mug in hand like it was a shield. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Cassandra snored softly beside me. Something was gnawing at me. It wasn't just suspicion, it was knowing. Deep down, I already knew. The next morning I made a call. A guy named Joel Kinney. Quiet, private, used to work compliance at a major research foundation before going freelance. Found him through a colleague who once used him during a grand embezzlement probe. He wasn't cheap. "I need eyes on 2 people," I told him. "Academic circles. University labs, off-site research locations, anywhere they're seen together. Names are Cassandra Langley and Dr. Simon Vale." Joel didn't ask why. Just said, "Give me a week." Meanwhile, Cassandra kept playing the part. She wore the same perfume. Kissed my cheek before work. Sent me a link to some greenhouse article like everything was fine. But I watched her more closely now, how her phone was always face down. How she didn't mention Simon's name even once after the gala. She could feel the shift. One night, I heard her talking to someone on the phone in the den. When I walked past, she lowered her voice. I waited outside the door until she finished. The next day, I overheard her talking to her best friend on the patio. She didn't know I was home early. He's been paranoid lately. Controlling. Honestly, I think he's losing it. Her friend muttered something I couldn't hear, and Cassandra laughed. Yeah. If he found out, I doubt he could handle it. That was the confirmation I needed. A week later, Joel called. His voice was clipped and businesslike. Found what you were expecting, he said. Photos, dates, travel logs. They've been meeting regularly. Labs, grant sites, private research greenhouses. Not all above board. He emailed me a zip file. I clicked through the images in silence. Cassandra in a white lab coat. Simon beside her. Close. Smiling. Once his hand was on her lower back. She lied. Over and over. I closed the laptop and exhaled. My heart didn't race. I didn't cry. I just started planning. The university greenhouse smelled like soil and lemongrass, damp and earthy in that familiar way. I knew Cassandra would be there. Thursday nights were always her late nights. Plant therapy, she once joked. I parked across campus and walked the rest of the way in silence, her keycard still clipped to my lanyard from that board retreat last fall. She didn't hear me come in. She had her back to me, bent slightly as she misted something leafy and blue-veined. Her hair was pulled up messily and she was humming. Nice place, I said, voice steady. She jumped, turning fast. Jesus, Roland. You scared the hell out of me. I didn't move. You alone. She nodded slowly, watching me. Why are you here? I needed to see something for myself. She set down the spray bottle, her hand stiff. This isn't the time or place for another argument. Not arguing, I said. I pulled out the envelope and handed it to her. What's this? Go ahead. Take a look. She opened it. Slowly. At first, just a raised eyebrow. Then a slight inhale. Photo after photo. Her at a research site in Santa Cruz, Simon right beside her. Another one, her entering a lab at MIT with him at 1 a.m. The hand on her waist. The late dinners logged in their travel receipts. The security footage Joel had pulled from the Arizona Grant Conference. Cassandra's mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't speak right away. When she did, she chose her words like needles. So you've been spying on me. I had to. She looked up. You think this proves something? It proves everything. She crossed her arms, defiant. You want a confession? Fine. Yes. Simon and I have been working together. Closely. But not the way you think. I said nothing. We're not sneaking around hotels like teenagers, she continued. This is about vision. About future. Simon gets it. He sees what I see, what we can become. You mean what you can take. She laughed once. Cold. God, you sound like a senator. You think I betrayed you? This, she gestured to the photos, this is evolution. Not some motel affair. This is legacy building. And I wasn't enough? You were safety, she said, her voice flat. Simon is ambition. That hit harder than I expected. I stepped back, let it settle. I want you out of the house. She scoffed. I'm not going anywhere. It's my name on the deed. It's our name on the property title. And my lab is 10 minutes away. The university considers me a cornerstone in the restoration program. Good luck making that messy. I'll find a way. She stepped closer, calm now. You really want to go to war over this? You're going to lose, Roland. You always play by the rules. And you never have, I said. That's why this ends now. Her jaw tightened. You want the full truth? Simon's married. His wife knows. They have an understanding. I stared at her, and in that moment I realized how far gone she was. Not just in the betrayal, but in believing none of it mattered. That she could rewrite the rules just because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. You're disgusting, I said quietly. She didn't flinch. Just walked back to her workstation and picked up the spray bottle. I have work to do, she said. If you're done playing detective, you can let yourself out. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked away. But as I stepped into the night air, one thought played in my mind, cool and calm like a blueprint unfolding. She thinks this is over. It's not. I started with the biotech portfolio. Quietly, methodically. No big moves to attract attention, just a few sell orders here, a few reassignments there. Within 2 weeks, I'd liquidated nearly $8 million in equity and moved it into a Delaware shell company I'd registered under the name of a long-defunct coral reef charity. Everything above board. Technically. My cousin Jeremy, a corporate attorney in New Hampshire, handled the paperwork. He didn't ask questions, just signed where I told him and smiled like he'd done it before. You divorcing or disappearing? He asked once. I looked him dead in the eye. Both. Cassandra didn't notice. She was too busy drafting a white paper with Simon about genetic resilience in post-industrial flora. It read like a manifesto. I found the draft open on her laptop one morning while she showered. She'd titled it The New Eden. Arrogant. Delusional. She started coming home later, sometimes not at all. I didn't ask questions. I let her believe I was sulking, wounded. It worked in my favor. She got careless. Meanwhile, I moved every digital asset I owned into encrypted wallets, art, patents, crypto holdings, even my collection of rare botanical NFTs that Simon once mocked as boomer bait. I laughed when I transferred the last one into cold storage. I used to think that man was just smug. Now I realized he was stupid too. Then I froze our joint savings. Cassandra found out when her rent check for an off-campus field lab bounced. Roland, she said that night, slamming the front door behind her, did you mess with the Chase account? I looked up from my tablet. You'll need to be more specific. Her face flushed. I have tenure. I have departmental housing rights. You can't cut me off. I didn't cut you off. I secured our finances. There's a difference. She glared at me like I was a slow student who'd interrupted her lecture. I'm filing a university claim. Emotional misconduct. You'll lose access until they review it. I stared at her for a moment. You mean abuse? It's not personal, she said with a shrug. It's protective. The university has housing provisions for spouses under professional threat. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. 2 days later, my daughter Elise came home for a long weekend. Fresh out of an MBA program at Yale, full of ideas and opinions. I talked to Mom, she said after dinner. You're being possessive. Possessive? I repeated. She says you're lashing out because she outgrew you. You know, some people just evolve at different paces. Modern relationships require adaptability. I stared at her, my hands resting on the edge of the table. She looked so much like Cassandra in that moment, it startled me. If Simon shows up at your graduation, I said, I won't. She blinked. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said evenly, you're free to choose who you admire. But don't expect me to sit beside him like nothing happened. Elise didn't respond. She just stood up, grabbed her wine glass, and left the room. It was fall now. Leaves were everywhere. Some I raked. Others I let rot into the soil. Just depends what you want to grow next. She came home late on a Thursday, wine-drunk and glowing like nothing in the world could touch her. Her heels clacked across the tile like punctuation marks. I didn't expect dinner, she said, eyeing the table I had set. Candles. Roasted chicken. Real linen napkins. What's the occasion? I poured her another glass. Just wanted to reset, I said. Too much tension lately. She eyed me suspiciously, then smiled. Well, look at you. Domestic bliss. We sat. She ate. We talked about non-threatening things, Elise's internship, some absurd new grant proposal Simon was pushing. I nodded and laughed where appropriate. By the second bottle, her guard dropped. Her cheeks pinkened and her voice softened. You know, she said, swirling her glass, I did love you. Still do, in a way. I smiled. That's good to hear. She leaned forward. We don't have to be enemies, Roland. We're not those people. No, I agreed. We're smarter. She tapped her glass against mine. Exactly. After dessert, store-bought tiramisu she didn't notice, I brought out the documents. They're from my firm, I said, sliding them across the table. Standard update stuff. Beneficiary restructuring. They want you listed officially. God forbid something happens, it streamlines things. She scanned the top page. Joint asset clauses? Only for optics. You'll stay protected, but it lets us move through audits cleaner. High net worth stuff. You know how it is. She flipped through, not really reading. She'd had too much wine, and her ego was too inflated. She'd already won in her mind. What did a few signatures matter? You're still such a good planner, she said, signing the final page without blinking. This is what I've always admired about you. Predictable in all the right ways. I smiled as I collected the folder. To predictability, I said, raising my glass. The next morning, while she nursed a headache and left for campus, I made the final move. At 10:12 a.m., I filed 6 claims through my shell corporation. Equipment loss. Grant misallocation. Fraudulent research expenditures. All tied directly to joint-signed procurement forms and shared institutional leases signed last night. She had no idea. By 4 p.m., the bankruptcy proceedings were submitted. The Shell Corporation, Langley Strategic Ecologies, LLC, reported a complete shutdown and liquidation of assets. The fallout began within 24 hours. By the time Cassandra realized what happened, the university's compliance office had frozen her grant access. The off-site lab in Tucson, the one she used for Simon's private research? Seized. Equipment repossessed. A $500,000 shortfall traced back to documents she'd signed under my corporate entity. Her signature. Her name. I didn't answer her calls. By Monday, her office was sealed pending investigation. She stormed home that night, slamming every door she passed through. "What the hell did you do?" she shouted, tossing the mail onto the floor. "You set me up." I looked up from my laptop calmly. "You signed off on everything. You tricked me." "No," I said. "I offered you a glass of wine and a pen. You made your choice." She stared at me, chest heaving. "You destroyed me." "No," I said again. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided you were too evolved to need me." She stormed out again, this time for good. She didn't even pack. And I sat back, sipping the last of the coffee she brewed that morning. The taste was bitter, but the aftertaste? Absolutely perfect. The first domino was Simon's wife. Her name was Felicity Vale, and she was not the quiet academic type. She sat on the board of an international research grant consortium, the kind that decides which university gets 8 figures and which one fades into irrelevance. I sent her a neat little package. No threats. No theatrics. Just a USB drive labeled, "For your consideration." Inside, Cassandra's signed documents. Internal memos between her and Simon about strategic funding overlap. A few screen captures from private lab surveillance Joel had generously collected. And audio from a hallway camera Cassandra didn't know I'd installed at the guest house. Simon's voice, clear as day, she said Roland was rich but predictable. That's what made him useful. Felicity didn't respond. But 2 weeks later, Simon was suspended from the university pending ethics violations and possible federal review. The second domino fell a few days after that. The university launched a quiet but thorough audit of Cassandra's department. Every grant she touched, every dollar she steered toward Simon's projects, was flagged. Faculty started whispering. Department heads began excluding her from memos. A young lab tech posted a now-deleted thread on academic Twitter about funding corruption and favoritism in ecogenomics. Meanwhile, I sold the house. It wasn't hard. I had transferred the deeds 6 months prior to a nonprofit I created called Relief Habitat Trust. Just another line item in the LLC shell web. The foundation sold it to a real wildlife group focused on urban rewilding. Within days of closing, contractors arrived to tear up the back patio and replant native grasses. Cassandra returned one evening to find the garage keypad disabled and a sign on the front lawn. "This property now belongs to the Chesapeake Conservancy." She called Elise. Elise called me. "You evicted her?" "She's not a tenant. She's a parasite. She's still my mother." I didn't argue. I just said she can apply for grant housing like the rest of the faculty under investigation. That was when Elise finally broke. "I defended you both, you know? To my friends. My professors. Everyone." I leaned back in my chair. "Yes. And what did that cost you?" There was a pause. Then her voice dropped. "I lost my internship," she said quietly. "My mentor said she couldn't attach her name to someone who excused institutional fraud and personal duplicity." She heard the audio? Elena played it for her in the office. "I didn't know anyone else had it." "They do now," I said. I expected her to yell. She didn't. Instead, Elise hung up. A week later, I visited the old house one last time, just to see it. The foundation had already removed the ornamental shrubs Cassandra loved and replaced them with milkweed and native ivy. The garden she used to tend in her sun hat and gloves had been mulched over and turned into a pollinator haven. A family of rabbits hopped through the brush. Somewhere near the porch, bees hummed around a wild bergamot patch. It was quiet. Peaceful. Cassandra tried to contact me once after that. A bland, formal email. No subject line. "We need to talk. This can still be undone." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to undo. She and Simon had gambled their reputations for power. They never thought someone like me, calm, polite Roland, would burn the ladder behind them. But I didn't burn it. I sold the ladder for scrap and then I let them fall. They say Patagonia is for those who want to vanish. I didn't come here to disappear. I came here to breathe. The research station is basic wind-battered steel walls, solar panels that rattle in storms, and a narrow cot with a view of the Andes. The mornings are quiet, the kind of quiet you can't get in cities or boardrooms. No buzz of phones. No back-channel committee gossip. Just wind, rock, and sky. The team here thinks my name is Richard Lang. Field coordinator. Former consultant. Keeps to himself. They don't ask much. Down here, everyone's running from something. I spend my days cataloging glacial runoff and tagging condors. At night, I log findings in a small notebook and heat lentils over a burner. It's not glamorous. It's not comfortable. But for the first time in years, I feel clean. Back in Maryland, the fallout kept spreading. I know this only because Joel sends me monthly summaries through encrypted channels. The university cleared Cassandra of criminal fraud barely but placed her on indefinite administrative leave. Her tenure protections didn't hold up under the ethical clause violations. She now works part-time as a grant compliance clerk at a small coastal college. No lectures. No labs. Just paperwork. She lives in subsidized housing near the train line. Joel said she applied for 3 fellowships and was rejected from all of them. Simon, meanwhile, spiraled. He started a podcast, Science Uncaged, where he rants about academic shadow wars and political hit jobs. He claims the system fears revolutionary thinkers. His last episode was titled, "I Was Targeted by a Global Conspiracy." It had under 500 views. Elise, to her credit, tried to rebuild. She got another internship, lower tier, but respectable. She went quiet online. The wedding was called off. The rumor, according to Joel's report, was that her fiancé's parents had heard the recording of her defending Cassandra's choices and withdrew their support. Loyalty, they said, has limits. She sent me a letter. Handwritten. I burned it without opening it. Cassandra tried one more time. A thick envelope arrived at the station, forwarded through layers of misdirects I'd set up long ago. I didn't expect her to find me, and technically she didn't. She found Richard Lang. Inside, a letter, a photo of us from our early years, and a return address scribbled in the corner. On the back of the letter, in shaky handwriting, she wrote, "Please. We weren't all predators." I sent it back with a note of my own. "I've rejoined the wild. No predators here." And that was that. Now, I wake up with the sun. I hike ridge trails with a notebook and a radio. I fall asleep to winds scraping the tin walls and the occasional bark of a distant fox. The legacy of betrayal? It's locked in a digital vault, far out of reach. Hidden in a folder no one knows exists. A final file marked, for Elise when she's ready. Maybe she'll open it someday. Maybe not. Either way, I'm not watching anymore. I'm free.